Ever since watching Jaws, it has given me such a fear of sharks. I just like that movie. For a movie that came out in 1975, that movie scared the crap out of me, man. It made sharks look like the biggest demon nemesis monster on the planet. And, I don't know whether it's justified because I think humans actually, kill more sharks than the other way around. But that's not to say that there aren't really deadly shark attacks. And this video here is going to discuss the deadliest one in US history. I wonder if it's just a single person that was taken out, or if, it was like a group of sharks and they just literally went, had a riot and just destroyed like a beach town or something.
All hands on deck. Man your battle stations.
The tragedy of the USS Indianapolis is considered one of the gravest disasters in the history of the United States Navy. If you've seen Steven Spielberg's 1975 mega-hit Jaws, one of the most riveting moments in the movie is a speech by the character Quint recounting the slaughter of the crew of the USS Indianapolis by a school of sharks.
I'll never put on a life jacket again.
If you thought some clever screenwriter just made it up for the film, well, allow us to fill you in on all the gory details. Today, we're going to take a look at the deadliest shark attack in human history. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know what other survival stories you would like to hear about. Okay, who's up for a swim in the most shark-infested waters of history? Time to get your toes wet. On July 26, 1945, the USS Indianapolis completed a mission that would change world history when it delivered the components for the first operational atomic device to the island of Tinian. The parts would be assembled into the notorious atomic bomb known as Little Boy, and just a few days later, it would be dropped on the Japanese city of Hiroshima, wiping out an estimated 80,000 people.
Crazy.
After completing the delivery, the Indianapolis was sent to join the USS Idaho in the Philippines. There they would assist in preparations for an invasion of the Japanese mainland. The ship set out alone for its new destination at a clip of 17 knots. It was smooth sailing at first, but the USS Indianapolis would soon find its journey coming to a sudden and violent halt. It was just after midnight on July 30th, 1945, when a Japanese submarine launched 2 torpedoes into the side of the Indianapolis. It was a direct hit that split the ship into 2. The order to abandon ship came quickly, but not quickly enough for some. It took just 12 minutes for the giant vessel to sink, and many didn't make it out. In fact, about 300 men were still trapped inside when the ship went down. They were never heard from again. Another 900 or so went into the water. They didn't know it yet, but their fate would be arguably worse than the ones who went down with the ship.
Oh my God.
The Indianapolis went down fast, and the resulting chaos led to numerous injuries and a lack of proper equipment for those who got off. Approximately 879 servicemen survived the initial sinking, but many didn't have the time to get life preservers, so they had to constantly fight to stay afloat. The ones who did manage to get life vests only had it slightly better, as they found themselves unable to do much but helplessly bob in the water. Many of the sailors were hurt, having suffered gashes or broken bones when the torpedoes struck. In the water, without even a life raft, they had no way to treat their injuries. As if all that wasn't bad enough, almost all of them were covered in fuel that was leaking out of the wreckage of the ship.
Oh, God.
It was so overwhelming, men were already beginning to die in each other's arms, floating in the ocean.
Can you imagine the panic, the anxiety, the feeling of dread? The water's cold, you're scared. Oh.
The Indianapolis sank fast, but in those 12 minutes, the heroic crewmen sent out SOS signals until they were absolutely unable to do so any longer. Those SOSs were received by the Navy, but for reasons that remain unknown to this very day, they weren't taken seriously. Even when the ship failed to arrive on time at its destination, no one got suspicious. No search parties were sent to look for the ship or its survivors. In fact, no action was taken at all. By sunrise, there was blood in the water, literally, and sharks came to investigate. Aware of their presence, the survivors attempted to stay together in groups as they bobbed in the water. But regardless of how hard they tried, eventually someone would break away and the currents would carry them off. Once a survivor was isolated from the group, the sharks would move in and quickly pounce. Survivors report that everyone could hear the screams before a body was pulled under, and afterwards, only the life vest would pop back up to the surface. This continued for days.
Days? Ugh.
While the shark attacks remained a constant danger to the men in the water, there was one thing that gave some of them a stay of execution. Some of the bodies that were trapped in the Indianapolis when it sank would occasionally float up towards the surface. The sharks were just as happy to feed on these corpses, as they were a lot less trouble. Unfortunately, while the floaters in the ship slowed the decimation of the survivors, in the long run, it wouldn't be enough to save many. By that point, the sharks were in a feeding frenzy, and there were only so many who survived. So despite the reprieve, the survivors continued to endure more days of shark attacks.
So every time the sharks were coming in, we would kick and scream and do things that we thought would drive the sharks away, and they did drive them away.
Oh my God, this is awful. Like, this is, you'd rather have gone quickly when the torpedoes hit, honestly, rather than just being slowly picked at and eaten by sharks.
On the surface, the survivors of the Indianapolis could see dozens of fins circling them at any given time. Beneath the water, the sharks kept up their attacks. However, they didn't always pounce immediately. In fact, sometimes they took the time to psych out their prey. Apparently, the sharks would occasionally bump against the sailors in the water, but not necessarily attack them. This tactic was apparently meant to lull the sailors into a false sense of security, because shortly after, the shark would attack. The sharks dragged their victims down into the depths. With each attack, the water grew more bloody, which in turn just led to greater bloodlust in the sharks. The sharks were certainly the most immediate problem, but they were far from being the only danger the survivors had to contend with. As they were drifting in salt water, the men had nothing to drink, and since they were out there for several days, many died of thirst. Any who attempted to drink the salt water soon became delirious with hallucinations.
Oh my God.
The life vests were also becoming increasingly waterlogged, which made it much harder to stay afloat. Consequently, several of the men died in the water before the sharks could even get near them.
Jeez, this is awful. Like, this is horrible. The survivors weren't discovered for almost 5 days. Imagine living this nightmare for almost a week. Like, how were they sleeping? They probably weren't. So they were probably delirious by now. Oh.
On the third day, several of the survivors found some crates floating in the water and lashed them together. While the crates weren't sturdy enough to use as a raft, they could be used for another important purpose: drying out the life preservers. The men would wring the life vests out by hand, throw them on top of the crate raft, and then put them back on when they were dry. This system allowed more of the survivors to stay afloat for longer. As a bonus, one of the crates contained some partially rotten potatoes, which the survivors carefully rationed to sustain themselves as long as possible. It was 11 a.m. on the fourth day when the survivors were accidentally spotted by Lieutenant Wilbur C. Gwynn.
Why did it take so long for someone to come? Like, surely if they'd not heard from, the captain of the ship, for a day or two, wouldn't somebody go out and look? Like, why did it take so long?
He was flying a bomber on a routine patrol. He immediately radioed for help. The USS Cecil J. Doyle, a destroyer that was relatively nearby, was alerted, and on his own authority, the captain diverted his ship to rescue the survivors.
Or didn't they have, long-range radio back then? Maybe not, to be fair.
Lieutenant Adrian Marks was the pilot of a seaplane assigned to assist with the rescue efforts by dropping rafts and supplies. After witnessing survivors being attacked by sharks, Marks used his plane to pick up the lone sailors most in danger of being eaten. The plane eventually became so full he had to tie survivors to the wings with parachute cords. But in the end, Adrian Marks saved 56 men that day.
Wow.
He landed that big goose. I saw him when he landed, and as he came in and hit that first swell, and that plane shot back up in the air, I didn't know it, but he tore up one motor. He ruptured the pontoon, but he set that big goose down.
Wow, only a third. So, just under 300, like 280 people. That's crazy. Ugh.
When the captain of the Doyle arrived on the scene, he threw caution to the wind and pointed a searchlight into the sky to alert other rescue vehicles in the area. As it was wartime, this move put his ship in massive jeopardy, but he could tell time was of the essence. Even given his resolve, by the time the rescue operations were over, just 317 of the original 879 survivors made it back to shore alive.
Wow.
A disheartening figure, especially given that the original crew had consisted of 1,196 men. All of the rest had succumbed to starvation, thirst, injuries, or the sharks. Everyone in the Navy was shocked and outraged at what had been allowed to happen to the crew of the Indianapolis. However, because their mission had been to deliver the parts of an atomic bomb, no one was exactly at liberty to tell the world what exactly had happened. The United States government kept the incident a secret for 2 full weeks. During that time, the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were both blasted, the former with a bomb made from the parts delivered by the USS Indianapolis. The U.S. finally released the news about the Indianapolis on August 15, 1945, the same day Japan announced its surrender. This almost guaranteed it would be buried by the news of victory. Several months after the disaster, Charles McVeigh, captain of the USS Indianapolis, found himself being court-martialed.
Why? Why? For not sounding the alarm quickly enough to evacuate the ship?
Apparently, McVeigh had failed to run his ship in a zigzag course that would have helped throw any Japanese submarines off their trail.
Oh.
If you're wondering whether this is a case of the Navy scapegoating a captain for some made-up offense to take the embarrassment off of itself, you're not alone. Many have pointed out that
Seems very harsh.
McVeigh was the only captain who was court-martialed for losing a ship during the entirety of World War II. Even Congress eventually decided the charge was bogus and cleared his name of any wrongdoing in 2000.
I mean, that's still, 55 years of shame he had to deal with. Him and his family, it's very harsh.
Sadly, it was posthumous, as McVeigh had taken his own life in 1968.
Oh, man, that is horrible. Dude, his family should, I don't know, take them to court. Ugh, it's so unfair what happened to that guy.
When multiple people die from shark attacks, it's usually the result of a series of strikes by the same animal, limiting the number of attacks that are possible. For example, in 1916, a shark known as the Matawan man-eater, which we did in a previous video, killed 4 people and attacked a 5th. However, those 5 incidents unfolded over the course of 10 days. Finding anything that even compares with the nightmarish carnage experienced by the survivors of the USS Indianapolis is nigh impossible. The sheer quantity of sharks and the immense length of time they were given to feed made the incident deadly on a scale that is unlikely to be seen ever again. So what do you think?
Dude, I mean, that was even worse than I thought it'd be. Like, I was thinking maybe, a few people would get taken out by sharks, but we're talking hundreds. Obviously, not all of them, not all of the 600 people that didn't survive the torpedo attack were lost to sharks, but a good portion of them. And it was slow. It was like over the course of days, like just horrible. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.